Good morning, everyone. Namaste. Welcome to the February edition of Yoga of Desikachar dialogue series. This is a dialogue series organized by Ritambhara Ashram and Yoga Vahini, and we commenced this series last year on the occasion of the birthday of Sri TKV Desikachar, which also happened to be the International Day of Yoga. And ever since, we've been regularly hosting these monthly dialogues, inviting senior students of SIR to share their learning and experiences of learning in this tradition and growing as teachers. And today we have a very special guest with us, joining to share his journey and his learnings with SIR. Before we begin the session, a couple of logistics announcements. The session is for about 90 minutes, and we will begin with a sharing by the speaker, by our guest today. And following that, we will also be having an interactive session. So we also have some of our senior teachers in the tradition, Sriram Sir, Rekhonath Narayanan, and a few others join the session. And there will also be opportunity for the participants who are listening in to ask questions and share their reflections towards the end of the dialogue. So on that note, I invite Sriram Sir. Sriram Sir is student of Desikachar. He's based in Germany, currently in Chennai, and he's also somebody who has trained many teachers across Europe. And I would invite Sriram Sir to introduce our guest for today and also begin today's session. Over to you, sir.
So good morning, everybody. And good morning, Hellfried. And good morning, Raghu. And of course, all the other senior teachers, my colleagues and fellow students of Desikachar to this occasion. So I have known Hellfried in association with Sir. So he's been a student of Sir and has belonged to his close-knit group of students, European students who have met with him regularly whenever Sir visited Europe. And Hellfried is from Germany. He's a psychologist, psychotherapist, psychoanalyst. I've had the opportunity of once conducting a workshop together with him, sort of trying to understand or make yoga teaching people understand concepts of psychoanalysis and sort of bring them in some sort of a relationship to yoga ideas. It was a very interesting workshop, which we did many years ago under the sort of recommendation of, with a recommendation of Sir. And although myself and Hellfried, we have only interacted in a very limited way, we have got to know each other, and something very interesting happened, which some of you may not know because it's not so well known here in India. Sir brought out a book together with Hellfried, and this book, under the name of Yoga, Patanjali and Freud, tries to understand the Yoga Sutras and the psychoanalysis of Sigmund Freud in a sort of comparative way, and so that psychoanalysts may better understand what is yoga talking about, and for yoga people to understand how much, how deep, or how this ancient knowledge is sort of reflected in modern thinking too. And I think it's very obvious that Sir chose Hellfried to do this project because Hellfried has several decades of intense practice experience with patients. He's a very senior psychoanalyst in Germany, and so it must have been a very enriching experience. And that's why when we floated this idea of having Hellfried for this series of conversations, we thought it'll be very exciting to have him speak about the development of this book and his interaction with Sir as he developed this book. So, and to have this sort of going in a flow, we decided also that Raghu Anantanarayanan should sort of be comparing or coordinating this session. And Raghu OTV is a very old friend of mine. He and his wife and myself and my wife, we have been friends as couples since many years, and TV is the one who introduced me to Desikachar. In as much we have a long and very friendly relationship and collegial relationship, and I'm happy to have him here. And he's of course somebody who is very deeply embedded in yoga and the understanding of the human mind in yoga, as well as he's had a lot of interaction with psychology through his long association with a person who is with a big scholar whose name he'll surely be mentioning very soon. So with this, I would like to hand over and welcome Hellfried for this round of talk with you, and look forward to some interesting reflections together with TV. Yeah. So.
I thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I do. Yeah. I would like to thank you very much for this kind introduction, but I have a small problem with my language because I didn't speak English for many years. So perhaps you could help me if I don't find the right word in English.
Okay, if you don't find a word, I'll translate it for you. Fine, go ahead.
Thank you. So I can start? Thank you. So I would like to thank you all for this opportunity. When I saw the picture of Desikachar, a lot of feelings came up in me, because he was the person who really changed my life. I'm not the only one, I'm very aware of this. But it's a very special journey, as Sriam said when he introduced me, which is combined with Desikachar. I was a student of psychology when I first started yoga in 1979. And in 1982, first time I attended a seminar which was conducted by Sir Desikachar in the south of France. It was in Annecy, a lac of Annecy. And the first time I saw him, I was impressed by his, how can I say, his capability to focus on the topic which was proposed, and his way to be, how can I say, with the public at the same time. And it was a great meeting with Gerard Blitz, Claude Marichal, and all those great yoga teachers were around him. And I was a small student and looking at this event from far, but very impressed at the same time. And what impressed me in Desikachar very especially, he was all the time looking outside the windows towards the mountains. And my feeling was he would have preferred to be there in freedom. So he, beginning, the impression of someone who is very focused, but he has inner freedom. He has a need for inner freedom at the same time. Next time I met Desikachar was in Grimentz, was 87. And they were doing a great meeting to install, if I may say this, a new kind of yoga teacher training program. And his best students were surrounded there, and they did a kind of contest. And there again, I had the feeling of this intensity, which came out of him, of his personality. He was very withdrawn at the same time, so he let his students perform, and he did not interfere, but everyone could feel his impact on his students. And there were a kind of anxiety also between his students also. But it was a very intense situation, I may say. Then I continued my studies in psychoanalysis. I became a psychoanalyst, and I came from Nice in France, where I was attending a great conference on borderline structure and the difficulties to treat people with borderline problems. And after this, I came to Saint-Baume, where Desikachar conducted a seminar on Vedic chanting, first Vedic chanting seminar in France, as I remember. And by chance, I met him with his student Claude, and I asked him directly what he thought about change in psychotherapy, change in psychic mental functioning. And he was very intrigued by this question. And later on, he told me he had always been thinking about this question, how to change, how to transform the human mind. And I was so lucky that Desikachar invited me to come with some of his students to see him in a small group. It was 96, I think, 96, I think. And I met him in his house, his beautiful house. He had his bureau on the top of the roof with banana tree leaves. It was very romantic and intense at the same time also. We were sitting around and we were discussing Bhagavad Gita, for instance. He had a blackboard. We were sitting on the floor, and he was discussing this topic like a professor at university, in my understanding. So he was very, very precise, very concise, and we, for days, discussed the situation where Arjuna and Krishna on the battlefield had to decide to fight or not to fight. It's a very emblematic situation for every psychic situation also. So this was striking event for me to see how his mind was working. Sharp, clear, and how can I say, as if he were really searching for something new. So he was open for discussion, open to find something new. This is what I. So he was very, very, during this time, I was a stranger to him. He was very kind to me. He introduced me to his students. There were people like Giacomenico, Lucia, Chandra, and all those people I liked very much, and I met later on also, and he introduced me later on to Shriyam also. So this was the beginning. And during our discussions, I felt that Desikachar was interested in my view on Western mind. Yeah. And I had the feeling that there were some problems with some of his students, and he was really interested to understand how the human mind in our Western civilization works. And I don't know how it's happened, but he let me speak with him, and I had the possibility to discuss those topics. And then I myself was at this time in a big problem, in big difficulties. It was about divorce with children and so on, and I was nearly sick. Nobody of my colleagues was able to help me. I was at this time someone who had been doing yoga for nearly 15 years. All the same, I was stuck. And in this situation, I needed help, and I was suffering. And so I asked her to take me as his student. And luckily, he accepted. He made a lot of tests with me, with a great kettle, and I don't remember what he did. It was a very complicated thing. And then he decided, yes, he would accept me. And one of the first things I remember he did with me, he shouted for me, Aditya Hridayam. I never forget. I was lying on the floor and I was crying. So this deep impact he had on my emotions was during the whole time when I was with him. So it's difficult to say in words, but after this, he started giving me yoga practice, very simple yoga practice, but with an intensity I never had before. So he came one day, shortly after our beginning, he came with a towel, and he said to me, "You will need this." I didn't know why, but after the session, I knew why. The floor was wet. And I was a man in his 40s. I was 40, 45, something like this. But it worked, and it was very good for me. So it was tapas, he called it. He had to cleanse the kettle, my kettle, what I was. This was the first step we did together. And then we discussed a lot of things, and I explained my personal situation I was in. And he made rituals, he gave me some coins, things to meditate on. And I felt if there was a way to come out of my difficulties, this was the only way for me. And slowly, by discussing, by doing my yoga training and exercises with him, he gave me some advices, but always based on what I was proposing to him. And one of those advices was that he thought it would be advisable for me to do a break. So I should leave my work and everything. And I had a practice, I had an office of my own, and I had many clients also. And he proposed to leave my work and to go for 100 days in the forest, in the rainforest, somewhere in the wild, in nature. For me, it was a big shock because everything he said for me was true, but this was too much. So I started negotiating with him. He accepted. And so it came out, I did 5-6 weeks and I went to Mexico. And I met my wife during this time. Before also, she came with me, she accompanied me. We were together there, but I was out of our civilization here where I was so stuck. And everything went very, very well. And when I came back, he proposed me, it would be good for me to marry. And I did, of course I did. And he became my best man. We married in Santa Fe, United States. He became my best man. Sonia Nelson was there, he was there. Some of the family was there. So it was a very, very touching event. And it was a cornerstone for my life. My life changed. And all the time, during my being with him was a process of change and evolution. For instance, when I met him, I had started a PhD work, but it was not finished. And he started calling me doctor. And I thought, no, he's always speaking the truth. I must finish my PhD. So it became true, and I did. So finally, what he said was real. And later on, he told me, a yogi always speaks the truth. And if the truth is not in accordance with reality will change in the way that finally the truth will be reestablished. So this was the way I saw him, as the way he worked with me and the way it functions, because everything what he did, in my understanding, worked. It was true. This is an experience I never had in my life before. I don't know, I have took some notes, but I would like to speak more freely, so like an association, if you allow, if you agree. So Desikachar had a very deep, how can I say, interest. He was curious to understand how the human mind works. And he saw that I was in a certain way specialized in Western mind, working with the mind as a psychoanalyst. And I spoke a bit about my work. He was very open because later on he told me he had a big prejudice against Western psychology because he thought they were always looking in the past, but one has to be in the present. It was his mantra, be present in the present as a yogi and not think too much on the past. And then he told me he understood that in our tradition, it may be really, how can I say, worthwhile to bring the past in, to clean the past and to work on the past. So there was a problem he let me understand with some of his students, and he was thinking about his failure. He said it like this. He thought about himself as if he had failed in some aspects with some of his students. And once, for instance, he wanted to reconcile with one of his students he loved very much. And so he said to me, you know, Hellfried, yoga teacher, and Achan, he never will go after his student. The student has to come to ask for. But in this case, I will do it. What do you think if I come to Europe and to speak with my student there? And so he came, he took the plane and the aircraft, and this took place in my house. So he lived in my house, he slept on my psychoanalytical couch. Very, very, very interesting experience. And he was so humble. So he came with a small case. He washed, he cleansed his clothes by himself. He insisted in cooking for us. It's incredible. And when we were together and someone came for visit, for instance, and he had a banana or something, just because it was difficult to find the right food for him, his first instinct was giving it. He gave it. That was his first instinct. So we traveled around Germany, France, Belgium a bit, and tried to reconcile, heal the problem with the student, but we didn't have a lot of success, but he tried. This is what I want to mention, he tried really. So by this, slowly by slowly, I lost my fear. I was a bit afraid of him because he has something mysterious. He is very intelligent, and what is the most difficult, you can see that he sees things you can't see yourself. So he is able to go through your mask, or the way you are, the way you behave. He's focused on the essential in you. And it's not easy to admit that there is someone in front of you who knows. And so small by small steps, I lost my fear, and we continued our work. And we started a series of discussions about the Yoga Sutra as he was told by his father. And he had, I think, how many, 10, 20 times he went through the Yoga Sutra with his father. And he asked my view as a psychoanalyst, how we would see this in our Western way of interpretation. And so we continued, and then one day he makes a proposal, we should record all our discussions and to make a book. And he wanted me, this book, to come out in German first. So as I already said, everything he said, everything he told, everything I lived with him was true. So the book had to become true also, and I started the work. So I recorded, and I wrote it down, and we found an editor and so on. And this book, it has been translated in English, in French, and in Italian now. And it reflects partially what his side, the authority, how can I say, the original way of his understanding of the Yoga Sutra. In some small parts, where we only worked about some sutra, but it is very, I think, very deep. And it is oriented perhaps towards a Westerner, as I was in front of him, so it was oriented to me to make me understand in my Western mind how the Yoga Sutra could be understood in this perspective. So I have to mention also that all what I'm telling now is my perspective. I think he has had so many students in so many times of his life, periods of his life, so everyone may have a different experience. I'm only speaking about my experience, and this, how can I say, this vertex we had together, but this vertex is, you can find in the book, it is the truth. All things I lived with him was true. And so what I understood, and this was striking for me, that the way he understood, the way he interpreted, the way he saw the mind was very similar to what I had learned as a psychoanalyst. A totally different frame of can I say, of concepts, but he had the same attitude, and there were many things which are very, very close. For instance, for us in psychoanalysis, it is very important to have a frame, which means you have to be very concise, you have to be precise, you don't intrude into the person, you have to respect the person, so there should be a mutuality. He had the same. In psychoanalysis, it is very important, for instance, be punctual, really punctual, to respect time. It was the same. He never was not there. When I sent the fax, some hours later, I had the answer. Or when we had an appointment, I came 10,000 kilometers from Europe the other morning at 10 o'clock. There was the appointment. It was something, it was a relationship which was pure, and it was reliable. This is the most important thing. It was really reliable. And this built up something in me which I hadn't known before. And so it went on and on. And to come to an end, it's not the end, but to give you a nice perspective of the end of my evolution. Finally, I think all what I became a yoga, I became a teacher, a trainer for psychoanalysts. I live in a wonderful house. I have a wonderful marriage. I have a good relationship with my church. It's thanks to him. I don't know what has become with me if I didn't have this opportunity and this encounter, this meeting. I don't know, it's difficult to say. How is this possible? And I think we found some keywords for this. The most important keyword, he always repeated, is relationship. It's the same for psychoanalysts also. You have to build up a reliable and very sustainable relationship. And without relationship, yoga is no yoga. Yoga has no sense. So for him, yoga was really building up relationship. I once asked him, because he gave me so many opportunities, he invited me, introduced me to his yoga students. I met Joitsna, for instance. We went to Kalakshetra School of Dance and with Mr. Sampson, where he did a presentation and so on. So he let me have a look in his life, in his professional life. And so I was allowed to go with him to the mandiram where he had a treatment center. And in the evening he came there and he did diagnosis with his patients or with students, whatever, but people who are seeking for help. And I could see how he worked with them. He was chatting with them, making jokes, looking in the eyes. And occasionally he took the pulse. And while he was chatting and speaking like very, very, how can I say, randomly, not very intense, but like this, he had a theory what to do with the patient. So he tried to come in a very relaxed relationship with the person, to touch the person personally, to feel the pulse, and then he knew what to do, and he wrote down the treatment procedure for the yoga teacher or for the counselors. So this was very thing. And then I asked him, for you, sir, what is the most important thing in yoga? What is healing? What's the healing point in yoga? And he said, relationship. I want to be in touch with the person. I have to relate to the person. It's the most important. And then he told me, very important is food, then relationship, and then asana. So for me, it was very striking and strange, but it was a kind of revelation also. But relationship, as he told me, is not relationship in a way, in a casual way. No, it has to be a deep relationship, sustained relationship, and the most important of all, and he never stopped mentioning it has to be a heart-to-heart relationship. And as I told, whatever he told me, as I experienced, was true. There is a heart-to-heart relationship. And he was able to come by his way to connecting people to enter your heart. So it makes that he's with you. When I saw the picture of your meeting here and I saw his umbrella, his glasses, I had the feeling immediately I'm in touch with him. He himself had a similar situation with his father, but much stronger, I suppose. I knew that he was suffering sometimes, but he never intruded me with his personal feelings. But I'm a specialized person, you know, it's my job to feel what other people feel. But he always, for me, partially, it was mysterious. But I could see his suffering. And he told me that he felt very alone. And one day he said, would you like to sit on my throne? Nobody is there. I can't speak to nobody. You have your teacher, I have nobody. But there is my father. Sometimes when I'm asking for something for help, there is an answer. I don't know if it is the best answer, but there is an answer. I don't know what answer would give if he were alive. So I could see how deeply he was with his father, lifelong. And I felt that something inside him was working all the time, was present. And this was the legacy of his father, I think. So it is a heart-to-heart relationship which has to be established, and which, if once established, continues. So I spoke with some of his long-term students, and they told me the same story. He is present. So every day, in a certain way, he comes to my mind. And I'm doing my yoga every day, do my chanting every day, without exception. And I'm really, really grateful to have the opportunity to share some of the aspects I lived with Sri Desikachar. So it was his reaching out for the truth. It is really something striking. Then there was something which really was striking also. This was his openness. So he was really, for a certain time, he was open to question himself. So my great chance I had was that during this period, he made a sabbatical year. So he withdrew from all his obligations, most of his obligations, and he was free to see me also. For me, it was paradise, really paradise. And we could speak about anything. Sometimes his wife was there, and sometimes even Mekala. And they speak about even sex workers, prostitution, but he was open and always seeking for the deeper ground. So this is an experience you really have in your normal life. So, but there was a thing, this openness was everywhere, but one thing was secret. One thing was, you were not allowed to touch, as I felt, and this was family. So he was very, very deep-rooted in his family. When he was in Europe, when we traveled together, he phoned twice a day. He was always in touch with family. But I felt it is not possible really to speak about it because there was something mysterious, something sometimes even painful. I don't know what. I didn't dare go inside this. So I tried to stay a student and not to be an analyst. And the mysterious thing inside him was something, and is always something I'm not able to understand. When we, for instance, drove in my car, south of France, and there were clouds, and the sun came through the clouds, he immediately said, "Oh, see, it's an invitation." So, or when he was here in my flat and slept on my couch, so in the afternoon, he had to withdraw because he said, "I have an appointment." So he lived a kind of mysticism, I would say. And he was in touch with a force. I have sometimes a glimpse of it. When I do my practice he gave me, I start having an idea of what it meant. It is something transcending everything. It's a light, everything. It is a power, it is the energy which is going through everything. And sometimes you may have an idea or a feeling of this. And my understanding was constantly in touch with this. When he gave your handshake in the beginning, I would have liked to keep him all the time with me because it was so relaxing, and so there was an energy coming outside from him. I don't know what it is, but it was extraordinary. So this is really a great gift to have been in touch with him. But as life is for all human beings limited, he had also his problems, but he did not, I don't want to say, he was able, but this is a very important concept, he was able to contain. Containing means I am with my life and my feelings, and I don't intrude with my feeling the other. He had respect for the other. And when he said, when I'm a yoga teacher, my relationship is only as yoga teacher. So I was free with me and my difficulties, and I didn't have to live his difficulties. Also, I knew that there were some things which were not easy for him. So then, later on, I understood that he had an understanding of the mind, which is, I would say, openness. Openness, let things come. And this, again, is a concept in modern psychoanalysis is getting more and more popular. It is by a great analyst called Wilfried Bion. It has been established in literature Wilfred Bion was born in the 90s, 100 years ago, in India. And he had the idea that there is something unknown, all the time evolving in our deep and inside and unconscious. And this unknown has a tendency to come up to the known and to disappear again to the unknown. So it's a constant evolving and becoming. And Desikachar was a bit like this. He was open. When I saw him after 6 or 4 months interruption, so I went there twice a year for 3 weeks. First thing was silence. And then after 5 minutes or even more, he said, shall we chant? And then he started chanting, I chanted. And so it went on. And after some minutes, we were attuned. Attunement is a very important concept in psychoanalysis also. And then again, silence. And then something came up. And it was always like this. It was never prepared. He took never notes like I have some paper to remind me. But for him, he let things come. So he was in touch with the invisible. He was not controlling. And this is something I think is very important. Yoga, in his understanding, as I see it in my vertex and in my perspective, is not about control. It is about letting go. It's about being open. It's about building up an open space so that things may come and realize in yourself from the unknown to something we can't know. So this is Ishvara Pranidharatva, for instance. And he was constantly living this. This was very, very, very impressive. And again, it was very true. So it's a lot of, how can I say, things which in my life, my professional life as a psychoanalyst, I could find, how can I mirrored in him. For me, it gave me the possibility to make a kind of, I wouldn't say scientific research, but he proved me that some of the very basic assumptions of psychoanalysis were true also, because I found them in a total different culture, in a total different civilization, if I may say. But we found out, he firstly, but me too, that there is really a difference between his Indian students and his Western students. The Indian mind, he told me, is very hierarchical. It's very going to the ancestors, to the family, and so on. Whereas in our Western society, we are very skeptical. We try to do tests and to have statistics and to confirm. And so we are very horizontal oriented. And we have difficulties to let go. We have difficulties to let things come from out of nowhere, out of the blue. We try to have techniques, but technique does not work in the depths, if I may say. And Desikachar told me with his Indian students, he had no problems. But with Western students, he did not know what was happening. Why didn't it work? Some of them, after many years with him, seemed to him to be stuck. And this was the beginning of our work together. And he incited me to continue this. And I did it in my way, in a very small frame. I didn't become a yoga teacher. No, I'm always a psychoanalyst, but a psychoanalyst with a yogi background, a student of yoga's background. And I started combining psychoanalysis with yoga, but not in the way that I would give them analysis and yoga at the same time. No, it would be a confusion, I think. So I started by sending people with who I knew they would not progress with analysis alone to do yoga at the same time. And I know someone who knows Desikachar and who is able to give them this kind of practices. And I had great, how can I say, opportunity is a great joy to see how powerful this combination may be. So, you see, I have sometimes patients coming to me 4 times a week for 10 years, 10 years. And there on the ground, sometimes there is something you can't touch with analysis alone. And after 7 years of analysis and not coming through a problem, I sent them to a yoga teacher, this yoga teacher, and then I saw the change. Some patient, she was partly psychotic, only partly. He told me after starting this yoga training, this yoga practice, now when I breathe and I feel my breath, I know I'm breathing, I feel alive. For her, the worst case was to be imprisoned in eternity, like in space. But by practicing pranayama, she was grounded. And this was the basis for her further development. And I saw it with other patients also. So when I had patients here who were not able to continue in a certain point, which is really very severe and very complicated, yoga may help tremendously. And the same is true for yoga people. I met yoga people who told me, it doesn't work, I lost. And when they start doing psychotherapy, something is going on. Desikachar told me he had seen some of his students starting psychotherapy, and he was also surprised because they started again. I think Laurence, she started an analyst also, and it works. So for us, maybe we are not able to do yoga as it was conceived, or is it conceived in the ancient tradition. Maybe we have to mix it, we have to find a way to combine it. Freud, for instance, he said once, perhaps we have to mix the gold of psychoanalysis with the copper of normal life. I don't know. But perhaps we, in our world, we have to mix our knowledge with the gold of Indian knowledge. I don't know, but we have to find our ways. One thing for me is for sure. I'm not an Indian. I can't understand some things I can't understand like Indians do. But we can try to build bridges and to understand and to find ways to do it in an analog way, you see. So we have to, it's not no use to pretend that I could be like you Indians, for instance, are. But we can exchange what we have in our world, the precious things for human mind. Yes, I don't know if there's something more you would like to hear. I could continue, but I saw, and there's a great joy, I had the opportunity to read the book of Raghu. He sent it to me, and I read it. It took me a week, and I must say it is a great work. It is a work that should have been done long before, because he's combining Indian philosophy and Yoga Sutras with a Western mind, and with a new model of psychotherapy, I would even say. It has to be completed with practical examples. Thank you very much. Perhaps you would like to.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, Hellfried. It was really nice listening to you. Yeah, just as you wonder, nah, the relationships that we've had with Desikachar. Yes. Many of us have said, "Oh, we wish we could relate to him like you people do."
Yes.
Because one of the things, like sometimes in class on one-on-one, especially because I was quite often talking to him about the mind and things like that, he would share from himself, but that was very rare. Yeah. And yes. I've always felt that he had a lot more freedom of sharing from himself to many of you. Yeah. So our envy is mutual, Hellfried. We envy you for some things, you envy us for some things.
Yes, maybe.
Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to quickly share with you was that one of the things that set me off on the path to write the book, which I've also mentioned in the book, is like you said, he was very, very open all the time.
Yes.
And
for me.
after I had started studying with Desikachar a couple of years down the road, I'd met this person called Professor Pulan Garg, who was doing a lot of work. Wilfred Bion's work and all that was part of his repertoire. He had worked with Rollo May in the US and some of these people, and he himself was a psychoanalyst. So I got him to meet Desikachar, and they had a very, very interesting conversation. Right? In that conversation, Desikachar picked out some 70 odd sutras, which he said were overlapping. Yes. So that's what I have focused on, because from that time, I've been kind of focusing on this. And this is, in a sense, the transition between a mind that is an ordinary mind and a mind that is capable of dhyana. And I think this involves a lot of cleansing, like you were saying, na? You have to clean your kettle. Yeah. So that's the process that, you know, I was very, very fortunate to learn from him. There was one question I have for you. I've gone through your book and it's fully marked. So at some point of time, I should, you know, ask you those questions from the book. But there's just two questions I want to ask you. I think one of them you've partially answered. One question is, how would you compare the idea of ego and ahankara?
I don't know the concept. Ahankara, I don't know the concept. I'm not very firm in the Sanskrit words. I know the ideas, but you have to help me. What do you mean by ahankara?
See, my understanding coming from both my study with Desikachar and his father is
ahankara is identification with something.
Identification.
Yes, now I understood. Yes, I read it in the book.
With the self. And
I read it in the book. Yes.
Sometimes
yes,
when I read the original description of ego,
I see. Yes,
as used by Freud, it sounds very much like ahankara.
Yes.
But the way the word ego is normally used, seems like what in English we would say egotism.
Yes, okay. The ego.
So there is this,
Ahankara is immediate and instinct, how can I say, automatic tendency of every human being, of the human mind especially, to be identified with what he lives. It is, I always say, it's a bit like a kind of Asmita, but on a deeper level. It is a part of me, yes. But the ego is very, very different. The ego is a construction of the mind. And the ego is all these things. I would say in the modern psychoanalysis, you would even say the ego is a defense structure. It is a structure the mind builds up to defend itself from things coming out, like being flooded by impressions, but also being intruded by spiritual things. So it is a kind of a filter. It is also a tool which helps you to organize your daily life. So it's a whole apparatus, if I may say, a part in the chitta which defends the ego, defends yourself to maintain your concepts of life. It's a very complicated structure. And it is so, by this, we have to give up this ego in a certain way to be able to have mystic experiences.
Absolutely.
What do you think about?
Absolutely. I've always compared the idea of ego with Asmita, because Asmita is also a constructed idea of the self.
Yes, Asmita, but Asmita is a certain part of the ego. The ego is much more complex. Asmita is the way I identify with something. I want to become something like this, or this is me. So it is a fatalistic, the fatal is the sad way of identifying ourselves with the environment and with our capacities and so on. It's like a narcissism, and I would say the narcissistic part of the ego. It is Asmita.
That's interesting.
My self-esteem. I'm finding my self-esteem and all my power by being someone with a big bank account and things like this. But the ego is the whole mechanism of defense against things I can't digest. You can see.
Yeah, I understand. There's another concept in the Yoga Sutra, Hellfried, which is talking about something that they use the word ashraya, which is like an inner structure of the self, which defends you both from certain things coming up and from the outside and so on. So that would be closer to ego, like you're speaking. Like you're saying.
It is closer to ego, and it is even deeper than ego. It is deeper than ego. It is before ego. Ego is more a defense structure, but ashraya, it is a structure you have in your life, which may be laid down in the first days of your life. And
absolutely.
Even perhaps before, I don't know. But it's the way you are, your way of being.
That's right.
Do you understand?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. So there are some things that are very convergent, in your terminology.
That's right. I'm so happy to hear this, because while reading your book, these were a couple of doubts that I had. So I said, I'm going to ask.
I was happy to read your book also. So,
the other question I have, Hellfried, is, to me, one of the central ideas in yoga is dhyana heyaha tadvitayaha. That just by paying deep attention to your own processes of the mind, it will alter. And because I'm paying attention, something else, some other intelligence will come and act. Whereas I cannot do something with my mind to change my mind. Yeah. So how would you look at this idea from a psychoanalytical point of view?
I think dhyana is a very misunderstood concept in our world. Dhyana, maybe it is a way of being with something without interfering of the ego.
Absolutely.
Without interfering of something, how can I say, artificial. It is to be with the object in a very open, very intense, very directed way. And I feel that many people, most people in our culture are not able to do this. And I think it needs a lot of meditation. I think some people, like the mystics, for instance, in the Middle Ages, were able to have this state of mind. And if you do so, I think something may come up. It is not a power, it's an energy. It's an energy coming from. And this energy makes you feel that you are not you. You are, how can I say, you are the recipient for something different.
Beautiful.
I say this. It is like the energy of the universe, which may touch you, and it combines with the heart. And these are some very, very rare moments you can have in meditation. But we in our society, it is nearly impossible, because we are so distracted by handy, by computer, and by our way of life. It's a massacre. It's a massacre for the human mind.
We are getting there, Hellfried. We are not too far behind. We're trying to catch up with you guys.
Unfortunately. But the problem is, it's not the outside. The outside enters the inside, and all these things are. We'll see. And Freud, he once said, how can I say, the layer of civilization is very small, and deep things inside you break out also. What we see now, this war in Ukraine, there's a barbarism inside us also. So we are floating. We are really floating with our possibility to reflect, and we have to be decent to see this. That's my feeling. Sorry.
Yeah. I think I'll open it out now. Otherwise, I'll keep on having I'm so excited with this. Yeah, I'll open it out for other questions.
Yes, please.
Sure, Raghu. Thank you so much, Raghu, Hellfried. So as I said at the beginning, we are also joined by others. There are senior teachers, Sriram, Dr. Lata is here. And also we have a very wide range of participants from across the world right now. So please feel free to there's a symbol to raise your hand. If you would like to unmute and speak, you can share your reflection or any questions you may have. While we wait for anybody more, I think Lita, you would like to ask?
Yes, we met at university in Madras in Chennai 20 years ago. I remember. You were helping. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure listening to you. I felt just as if I'm in the presence of Sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. And definitely would like to read your book. I don't know Germany, but definitely I will take help of somebody and try to read it.
Yeah.
So the question anyway, basically, it's not a question, it's a reflection. Basically, personally, how do you feel that your own practice of psychoanalysis, how much you are able to integrate some of these concepts of Yoga Sutra in your own work? Is there any possibility?
Yes. I must say, there is a problem with me because I am a psychoanalyst and I'm a trainer of psychoanalysts. And I was for some years even the head of the training unit. So I got deep insights in material, if I may say this. But all the same, I feel like a student of yoga. And it gives me a certain distance to our practice as a technique.
Good.
But I'm not a technician as a psychoanalyst, but there is an openness, you know. Desikachars helped me to keep this gate open, that you never know, and that you have to, sometimes you have to be active, but in general, you have to stay open. And I think I don't rule out many possibilities because I'm a psychoanalyst, because I know the other world. So it helped me to have several perspectives at the same time. And it gave me something even more. And this is why I give advice my colleagues, if possible, to do yoga also. Because many of the emotions you live with your patients are going through your body and they are affecting your breath. And when you're working with people for a long time in a very intense way, by doing yoga, you will breathe differently. Your heart will be different. Your heart rate will be different. So the body interferes in psychoanalytical treatment. And this response you will give on an emotional and body level to your patients will be transferred to the patient.
Definitely.
This is so important. And there is a very simple thing which affects me also, because if you work with human beings for a long time, and perhaps you know this also, and with severe ill people, for instance, psychosomatic diseases, it affects your own body also, and you have to cleanse yourself. And yoga is a kind of cleansing myself from all these ill effects and emotions. And it helps me to stay alive and to stay in good health. Desikachars once said to me, if you work with people, you have to be able to give honey. But how can you give honey if you are not able to produce honey yourself? You know, it is so important. Sometimes psychotherapists they start being dependent on the patients because they need the patients to stay alive. So it is very, very important to have a source in yourself, and it's very important to be grounded, and it's very important to have a healthy body, because the body reflects the emotion of the patient also.
Absolutely.
Absolutely true. Thank you very much. Let me hear others.
So Hari, if there are no others, I'll put a question. Otherwise,
Sure, Sriram, you can. Yeah. Then I'll come to. There is one question from Vijay Lakshmi. Maybe I can ask.
Let her do. My question can come later. Yeah.
So Vijay Lakshmi has shared a question in the chat. This is regarding what you shared about certain things that you may not understand, like the Indians would. So I'll read out the question. You said there are some things that you don't understand like an Indian would. Can you talk a little bit about what these things could be? At some level, don't we transcend these cultural markers?
don't understand the question.
In your sharing, I think towards the end you had shared about there are certain things that
Yes.
Indians
Okay.
would. So she's asking, is there a point where you may transcend that cultural marker, or what could those things be which you feel?
For instance, in Indian tradition, as I felt it when I arrived in India, there is an atmosphere of Shraddha, because you have everywhere, you have small goddesses and people with flowers. So they have a way of being, of practicing and living devotion. In our life, when you come to Europe, you have everything, red lights, green lights, you have to follow, and everything is controlled with cameras. To find devotion, to be open for something traditional, if I may say. And I don't know how to surpass this. I feel we have in our culture, in our Western culture, to re-establish the reaching out for true relationship, to be open for the unknown, and for surprise, being open for surprise. And we have to, how can I say, to question our tendency for control. This. For instance, group therapy. But I have 4 groups, group therapy. When patients come into the groups, they never know what will be the topic today. This is open. And you never know how you will leave the group. What happened? Because everyone has an idea and something will come up. A central theme may come up, but you never know what theme it will be. And to be open for those invisible things. Take the war in Ukraine, for instance. Putin, he didn't picture what it's going to become. He couldn't do this. But you can't, it is like an explosion, and you can't, it is imprevisible. And we have to take into account the imprevisible. We can't control everything. And Ukraine, my fear is it may go out of control also. But this is another thing. I don't know if I have answered your question. Is it for you okay?
Vijayalakshmi, yes, she agrees that she's got her answer.
So it's a central point in our civilization is control.
Thank you, sir. Sriram, sir, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, I have 2 questions, Hellfried, which are sort of converse questions. The one question is, a lot of people in India as well as in the West are teaching yoga today and have made a profession, or have a yoga teaching as a profession. And we are, of course, not just teaching asanas. Even if we are mainly focusing on asanas, we end up, because yoga is what it is, we end up thinking of relationship, thinking of the mind of the students, etc. And something happens in the mind of the students. So you as a psychoanalyst who's anyway directly working on the subject of mind with people, what do you think is going wrong or could probably go wrong for yoga teachers if they don't watch out? Yeah.
This is Desikachars would say this is a $1 million question. Yes.
Yeah. So okay, I can't give you that money, but please ask.
You have to see. Look at the church. What's going on with the church? You know, always if you work with the mind and with people, there is danger everywhere. Always, you have to know this. And there are 2 things which may really, and it's related to the first question also. We have 2 things in my understanding, 2 things to protect ourselves. One thing would be a very strong relationship to hierarchy and to our tradition. A deep understanding of our tradition, our identity, rooted in this tradition, as I felt Desikachar was. And the other thing for us who are not rooted, like he was, is we have to find mechanism to help ourselves. And we need some rules, not control, but some rules of behavior. And I think in our tradition, we found those rules. And I think also yoga.
Sorry, in your tradition, you mean in the psychoanalyst tradition?
Yes, and psychotherapists also. And I think yoga teacher, late or may, but always, finally, if they start working with their clients or with their students, there will be a point where it becomes a kind of psychotherapy.
Correct.
A kind of helping. And when it comes to psychotherapy, there are unconscious processes which are going to install, which means that wishes from childhood, aspirations for the future, things they don't speak out, may enter the room or the classroom. And it is not outspoken, but it is latent. It is underneath even the threshold of how can I say, consciousness. And I think the yoga teacher should have a training for this, that so they may be able to understand what is the need of the person, what does he do with me as a yoga teacher, what does he try to make happen, and what is behind everything. And sometimes there are temptations also, psychic temptations to do more, to see more often, to be more casual, to be more like a friend or a father or a mother. But one has to understand this and to make it open. And there is also the sexual danger, that there may be a relationship which is not conformed to the rules. So we have to be open that everything has, I wouldn't say dark side, it has an unconscious side. And a yoga teacher who is not deeply rooted in a tradition like Desikachar was, he should be aware of this. And there should be a training, there should be a bit of theory, a bit of self-understanding, Swadhyaya, in the classical way, Swadhyaya. I don't know. It is a very, very fruitful and precious thing to do, to give yoga classes, but it is dangerous also, because you are active, you are touching the body, and the sexual, how can I say, drive is one of the strongest. After hunger, it is a sexual drive, the strongest drive in our constitution, the human constitution. And so if you work with human mind, you have to be careful and you have to know how to protect you and your students. Sorry.
So you are suggesting if you are not so deeply rooted in a tradition like Sir was, that we need to develop a set of rules which guide us.
I think so. And you have to, how can I say, to be with colleagues. You have to meet once a month, or I don't know, with colleagues, and to speak about your patients, your students, and
your colleagues.
Discuss your problems, because when you are with human beings, there is always problems. It is kind of definition of the human mind. He's always problem creating and problem solving, you know. And so you have to, I think it should be necessary to have a strict rules and a strict procedures and even control, but in the sense that you are helping each other. See?
Can I ask a question?
Sorry.
Yeah. Sir, are you complete with your question?
No, yeah, my question is complete. Maybe some.
Okay.
I have one more question, but please go ahead with other questions.
Okay, so Karin, you can ask your question.
Yeah, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you very much for bringing history to us, because a lot of us did not have the privilege of having Desikachar as a teacher. So this is a wonderful forum, and it sheds light on much of the rationale that we understand as yoga therapists. One of the questions I have, and I've come from a psychology, social science background, but abandoned that and put it aside. I worked in policy and government, etc. And then with yoga, coming back to concepts of the mind, of course. But one thing that was made clear to me from my teacher was, don't ask about the past. Do not question and intervene into the analysis. And our Western Cartesian thinking mind would like to know why. Why did this happen? When did it occur? What happened to you to become like this? Or what is the cause? Whereas the wonderful guidance that we had from Dr. NC, for example, was just look at the present. Just look at what is coming up in the present and deal with that. And just look at what's facing you in terms of the pulse, the current reactions, the current situation that is facing you, rather than trying to analyze the past. So I'm wondering how you knit these two structures of thought that appear to me to be quite different, how you reconcile them. And by the way, I'm in Australia, so it's wonderful to be part of
my son lives in Australia. He's in Sydney now.
I'm in Sydney.
Wonderful country, wonderful country.
Thank you.
So Desikachar said the same. Why being focused on this past? Because we have to be present in the present.
Yeah.
But in our discussion, it came out, and finally he said he changed his mind on this. And he understood, as he told me, you can't be present in the present if you are in a change, if you are imprisoned by a chain who takes you back to the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to see the present in the present says that you have to be conscious of what's going around. But we have to admit consciousness is less than 10% of our capacity. 10% or even less, 5%. What we see consciously is only 5 or 6% of what is happening really. And what I'm doing now, it is, how can I say, it's being supported by my unconscious past. And it is, there's a big misunderstanding looking at the past and trying to find the key in the past to be able to come better in the future. No, there is a misunderstanding. There is no key. And there is no help by intellectual understanding of the past. I can give you all the key problems of the past and it won't change anything. What is meant by looking in the past, it is meant find the feelings, find the emotions of the past and make them come up in the present. You see, what is happening in the present is fueled by the past, but it is always in the present. But the fuel comes from the past. So I have to make the past come up into the present. It's no use to look, because looking, if I may say it, if I look at you and you look at me, we are looking with our eyes, but our eyes can control where they look onto, you know? Yeah. And so looking is very near to control. But we can't control the emotions of the past. We have to come in a situation where we are able to let them come from the past into the present, to feel them in the present, to understand them in the present, and then we will be freed from them, and then we will be able to understand the present, what is going on, really going on. Beautiful. Can I make you understand?
That's good. Yeah.
But this needs to do this, to have to be in a relationship which is really stable. You have to have shraddha, confidence and trust, you see. And you need a frame where this is possible. And so I think if you have a good relationship with your teacher, you may cry sometimes. And those, if you do your yoga sessions, so all your emotions are sometimes imprisoned in your muscles. And if you relax, the emotions come up. And you have to be able to let them come up. But we, as psychoanalysts, we would say, and now we have to understand what kind of emotions they are. You see? But the battlefield of analysis is the present, not the past.
Yes, yes. So it's the past living in the present. The past.
Yes, the past living is the present. Yes. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Karin, for that question. And Sriram sir, would you like to add to your earlier question? You're on mute.
I can't hear, sorry.
I got it. So my question is sort of the vice versa, the contrary of the earlier question. So you are a psychoanalyst, and I think you even train psychoanalysts. No, so you actually,
Yes, of course.
Being a trainer, you cannot deviate from psychoanalysis, and you have to sort of teach what psychoanalysis, and you cannot put your own experience into it too much, I guess. Yeah, because you're. But supposing you would drop the idea of you being a trainer of psychoanalysts, I mean, you drop what psychoanalysis says and still teach psychoanalysts or train psychoanalysts, what would you add out of your experience of yoga to enrich psychoanalysis? I mean, of course, you cannot do it because maybe as a teacher, you have to be strict and say, this is psychoanalysis, and you have to write the exam, you have to pass the exam.
To enrich psychoanalysis, what do I add to analysis from yoga?
Yeah, based on your understanding of yoga, yes, what would you add to psychoanalysis?
For instance, one patient come to me, she has neurodermitis. So the skin was red, it was inflamed by neurodermitis. And she did psychoanalysis and it became worse. It didn't help. And I spoke with her. I was ready to do a psychotherapy 2 sessions per hour, only not 4, but 2, under the condition that she would do yoga. And parallel with the treatment, 2 sessions per week, and the yoga, she was able to let this disease go. And so she made a wonderful development. She became a disease manager, finally, in an hospital. So it was, how can I say, a way of dealing with her problems of neurodermitis. I know that if you are working with people who are psychosomatic diseases of the skin, for instance, they have problems with being separated. So if you do a psychoanalysis 4 sessions per week with such people, it may become worse because they lose their boundaries and the skin will be inflamed even more. So she needed the feeling of being autonomy, to have an autonomy. And by doing yoga, she had a feeling of her body, and to have her autonomy was reinforced. And so she became, how can I say, the master of her body, perhaps. But it helped her to continue her therapy, and it was better as psychoanalysis would have been. So sometimes we have really to mix these 2 techniques. And always when I start a therapy with people, I advise to do something for the body, and preference is yoga, of course. But the problem is, in our country, you can't find most of the yoga teachers do gymnastics. They do sport. It is not the yoga as we learn in India. So it is very difficult to find the right yoga teacher. Did I answer your question? I can't hear you, sorry.
Sorry. Your answer was very interesting because it brought out the fact that, at least in the case of this patient, the sense of autonomy is not brought out by psychoanalysis at an early stage.
In this case, yes.
In this case. So my question is, supposing you were doing a training for psychoanalysts, you would go to the University of Cologne and do a sort of a semester, you teach psychoanalysis, but not as a trainer of psychoanalysts, but as a person, but Hellfried Krusche, who's got a background of yoga and who's going to use his yoga knowledge to talk to psychoanalysts and train them. What is it out of yoga you take into the body, or the theoretical body of psychoanalysis? That's what it would be interesting to know.
What I did until now, I had some talks, some meetings, and some conferences. For instance, there is a German meeting of psychoanalysts in Germany once a year, and twice I did a presentation, a case study once with this patient I was speaking about, and the other one I did. I tried to make understand Wilfried Bion's proximity to yoga. So I try to make them understand this tradition and to make them curious. So how can I say? So I did some public talks on this topic, but you have to know there are some people who are very interested, but it is all the same. It is an outsider theme. It's an outsider theme. But I try, and it has even been published in the newspapers, in the scientific papers. So I did some paper on this topic to see the proximity and the importance of yoga and the Indian tradition for psychoanalysis. Yes, but it is a very theoretical way of giving information. Yeah, I did it with the help of some. When I do this, I always try to find a senior. So there are some very renowned persons in our psychoanalytical world, and I try to find them to do the mediation, you know. So you have to have the support, because there are a lot of prejudices in the analytical world, in the yoga world also.
Yeah, naturally, of course, yeah. Mm.
You have to overcome those prejudices. But it's getting better.
So what would be a central yogic idea which would enhance or widen the minds of the world of psychoanalysts?
The importance of the body. The body is the recipient of emotion, and he is a resonance. He is the resonance of emotion, and the change of the body will change the mind. And we have to work on this level. And very often, with 1 session a week or 2 sessions a week, we are not able to touch this profound level. So embodiment, this is a new trend in psychoanalytical and psychotherapeutical theory nowadays, is the embodiment of the psyche. And you work with the body. Is it okay?
Very good. Yeah, sure. I think, yeah, I've got the answer. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. We have still about 10 minutes. So if there are more questions, you can either share it on the chat or voice it out by unmuting yourself. I have a question for you, Hellfried, from whatever you shared right now. One part that I hear you say is that there is a certain sense of yoga being an outside theme when you try to introduce it amongst psychoanalysts or such groups.
Outside?
Like it's an outside theme when you try to present it in psychoanalyst groups.
Subject.
As a subject, it is not inherently part of psychotherapy. But in your experience of applying it in your practice with students or patients, how do you see the receptivity amongst the general population on receiving yoga therapy as a complementary practice to psychotherapy?
For me, I can say yoga is a complementary technique, and it is very important also. And how can I say, I advise my patients to do something like yoga. But as I already said, there are very few yoga teachers who are able to do the way Desikachars told us, teach us. So they are doing gymnastics. But all the same, I think it's better to do this than doing nothing. I will give you and there is a very fruitful combination of yoga and psychotherapy in very different levels. I will give you one example. I have a patient coming for me. She's doing a training as an analyst also. She's coming for nearly 10 years. And she had very deep emotions, and she felt lost, and she was crying. Sometimes it was heartbreaking. And slowly, it became a bit better, but there was something I couldn't come over with her. And then I advised her to go to do yoga. And I could observe how she became more grounded, how she became more self-confident. And then one day she told me, by doing this posture, is a Virabhadasana, where you have to open your. She told me, you know, I was an unwanted child, and I always tried to hide myself, and I was not confident. I was angry to be present. And with this posture, I had the capacity, I'm there, and I am, you know, I feel myself. And she stood up, if I may say. It was yoga, you see. And we have to, I think, I strongly believe we have to combine this. This is really my deep belief.
Thank you for
Only
that.
a very, very small example of, there are so many examples of this. But we need yoga teachers who are in the tradition of Desikachar, who have a feeling for being also a therapist, but who know what they are doing and responsible for what they are doing.
Thank you, Hellfried. That's valuable. Any more questions, reflections?
I think it'll be nice if you have a PDF of the title of Hellfried and Sir's book, just show it up once on the screen so that because it's available in English also.
Yeah, I must say, Sri Ram, I must say, you helped me. You helped me to bring it out. You helped me with the book. You found the translator for the English version.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but
yes,
yeah.
a lot.
I was also very happy that it's coming out. I was really happy that Sir did something like this with you. So please, Hari, if you have the book, could you please
I'm just opening it on the browser. I'll just share that.
Okay. And maybe the book of Raghu also, that will be very interesting.
Yeah, the book of Raghu, I would like to buy it because he gave me a draft.
I don't think it's available for sale.
As it should be.
I would also like to buy and read it.
Yes. I looked at Amazon, but it's not still yet there.
No, it's not available.
So this is the book, right, sir?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can find it in French, in Italian, and in but the most important is Desikachar. Don't forget, he is the one who has really the...
Yeah, sure. Sure. You have a Raghu's book also?
I'll just find it.
But anyway, it's not available.
I wanted to really thank you. I mean, I could not be the part in the beginning, but within such a short time, just this mention of yours about how the emotions are held up in the body has, and how to be able to observe oneself, what is coming from the past, and to be able to allow it to come out instead of, trying to put it and being in the present. This has really opened up something for me today. I knew, but through these words and your work, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thanks for sharing that. So this is the book by Raghu on Antaranga Yoga, and it's yet to be available as published book.
I read it, and it is really, really very complex.
Antaranga Yoga. Okay, nice.
Okay. I think we don't have any more questions. It's been an extremely insightful and valuable session, Hellfried. And thank you for accepting.
Hi, Hari. This is Soumya here.
Yes, Soumya.
I just have one question
Sure.
to Hellfried. I am currently teaching yoga for the past 8 years, and I learned in KYM tradition in Chennai. So I had a chance to meet senior teachers like Lata Madam and everything. So I gladly join each of the sessions, and there is so much of learning in every session which I get, being an upcoming teacher in this field of yoga. And one question for me is, does studying this psychotherapy help more in helping the people apart from handling with yoga therapy as a complementary one? Or how do we get into this study of psychotherapy so that it will help people to heal more in a deeper level?
It's a very, very complex question. I think the most important thing we have been speaking about is relationship. We have to build up the capacity to build up a very sustained and reliable relationship, and to make sure that this relationship will not be affected by things which have which may make it put it in danger. We have to protect, we have to build up a protected, reliable relationship. I think this is the most important. And there should be a really emotional impact from both sides. You may be a very good trained analyst or psychotherapist. Without the capacity to enter the emotional life of your patient, you won't get very far. And the same with the yoga teacher who has not understood the need for protection and security, and he may become dangerous, you know. So we have to we have to speak about those principles. And it's not necessary to build up big structures, control people. No, we have to, I think it would be better to have an open exchange and to make, we in our profession, we do intervision, we call it. So we have meetings of colleagues where we speak about our experiences and we control each other, but in a productive way. May I make you understand?
Yes, yes.
It is a very, very complex theme. It will never be perfect, but we have always been very, very aware and very open and attentive also. Attentive also.
Yeah. Because there is a very fine line between getting into a personal level of a person and just staying away from it in order to heal that person. So that is what I feel. And your thoughts have been very insightful, especially the emotions getting into the muscles. You know, I feel it for myself when you tell them. So, and each of the questions which Sriram sir asked, I never had a chance, but I always keep learning from his Facebook, post and everything. But I keep inspired and keep learning in these ways from you people. So thank you so much for that.
Yes, continue learning. As
Thank
Desikachar said, learning the
Yes.
whole life, always, never stop learning.
Yes. And the more I go deeper into it, I feel yoga is the big ocean. And I just kept my feet on it. You know. So thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Namaste.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so on that note, it's time to conclude this edition of Yoga of Desikachar Dialogue. Perhaps let's conclude with a prayer. Sriram sir, you? Yeah.
Anyway, Hellfried, from my side also, thanks a lot. Yeah, it was very enlightening to hear your thoughts. And of course, it's difficult to join, so I'll just say Sahana Bhavatu, because this is something which, prays for all our welfare, for the welfare of all of us who are here. Sahana Bhavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Hellfried, for joining us today. And thank you, everyone, for taking time out on a Sunday to join this dialogue. We'll be back next month with another special guest and a senior student of Sir, and hope to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.